When Game of Thrones ended in 2019, millions of viewers watched Jon Snow ride beyond the wall with the free folk, and most people thought they understood what happened. He killed Daenerys, got sent to the Night's Watch as punishment, and that was that. But if that's all you took away from Jon's ending, you missed one of the most brilliant pieces of storytelling the show ever delivered. Jon's ending is not what it appears to be on the surface. There is a hidden message woven throughout 8 seasons that reveals why his final scene is actually perfect, even if the execution of the final season left much to be desired. Let's start by clearing up the biggest misconception. Jon Snow did not return to the Night's Watch. Yes, he was sentenced to rejoin the Night's Watch by the Council of Lords in the Dragon Pit. Grey Worm and the Unsullied demanded justice for Daenerys' death, and sending Jon to the wall seemed like the perfect compromise. It satisfied Grey Worm's demand for punishment while saving Jon's life. But here's the thing most people overlooked. That final scene shows Jon arriving at Castle Black, reuniting with Tormund and Ghost, and then doing something crucial. He leaves. He rides north beyond the wall with the wildlings and never looks back. That glance over his shoulder before disappearing into the forest was not just a farewell to Castle Black. It was Jon saying goodbye to his entire old life. So what was the point of the Night's Watch after the White Walkers were defeated? Tyrion gives an explanation during the Dragon Pit scene, saying the world will always need a place for broken men and bastards. But that explanation rings hollow when you actually think about it. The White Walkers are gone. The wildlings are no longer enemies but allies. The entire reason the Night's Watch was founded no longer exists. The truth is much simpler. The Night's Watch served as a face-saving political solution. It allowed the lords of Westeros to claim Jon was being punished while Grey Worm believed justice was served. But once Grey Worm sailed away to Noth with the Unsullied, there was nobody left to enforce Jon's sentence. Nobody to ensure he stayed at the wall. Nobody who actually cared. Now let's talk about what Jon's ending really means. To understand it, you need to go back to the very beginning of his story. Jon Snow spent his entire childhood as an outsider. Despite being raised alongside the Stark children at Winterfell, he was always reminded that he was different. He was a bastard, the supposed illegitimate son of Ned Stark. Catelyn Stark made sure Jon knew he would never truly be one of them. When King Robert Baratheon visited Winterfell in the first episode, Jon was not allowed to sit with the family at the feast. He had to stand in the back with the other bastards and common folk. This shaped everything about who Jon became. When Jon joined the Night's Watch, he thought he was finding a place where he could belong. His uncle Benjen painted it as a noble brotherhood where birth did not matter, only actions and honor. Jon believed that at the wall, he could finally build his own identity instead of living in the shadow of being Ned Stark's bastard. But the Night's Watch turned out to be just another institution full of rules and hierarchies. Jon excelled there, rising to become Lord Commander, but even that brought him nothing but pain. His own brothers murdered him because they disagreed with his decision to let the wildlings through the wall. They stabbed him repeatedly in the courtyard of Castle Black and left him to die in the snow. Here is where things get interesting. When Jon was resurrected by Melisandre, he technically fulfilled his vows to the Night's Watch. The oath says your watch shall not end until your death. Jon died. Therefore, his watch ended. When he walked away from Castle Black after executing the men who killed him, Jon was legally free of his obligations. But more importantly, he was spiritually free. Death changed him. He was no longer the boy desperately seeking acceptance and trying to prove his worth. He realized that all the oaths and honors and duties that had defined his entire life were ultimately hollow. This is the first key to understanding his ending. The second key is Ygritte. Most viewers remember Ygritte as Jon's tragic love interest who died in his arms during the Battle of Castle Black. Her famous line, "You know nothing, Jon Snow," became one of the most quoted phrases from the entire series. But Ygritte represented something much deeper than a romance. She represented freedom. When Jon lived with the wildlings while undercover, he experienced a completely different way of life. The free folk did not kneel to kings. They did not follow rigid rules about honor and duty. They chose their own leaders based on strength and capability. They wandered where they wanted, loved who they wanted, and lived without the chains that bound the people south of the wall. Jon fell in love with more than just Ygritte during that time. He fell in love with the idea of freedom itself. In that cave where he and Ygritte made love, Jon Snow was truly happy for one of the only times in his entire life. He was not Lord Commander Jon Snow. He was not the bastard of Winterfell. He was not trying to live up to anyone's expectations. He was just Jon, a man who could choose his own path. Ygritte's death haunted him for the rest of the series. Even when he began a relationship with Daenerys Targaryen, Ygritte's memory lingered. Several times throughout later seasons, Jon would think of her. When he mistook the red-haired Melisandre for Ygritte. When he heard her voice echoing in his mind. Even Melisandre herself said to him, "You know nothing, Jon Snow," using the exact phrase Ygritte had repeated to him so many times. The show and the books are filled with these quiet moments that reveal Ygritte was not just a love Jon lost. She was the path not taken. Every time Jon was forced to choose duty over what he wanted, Ygritte represented the life he gave up. When Tormund told Jon before the Battle of Winterfell that he should come north where he belongs, that he has the real north in him, Tormund was not just being friendly. He saw what Jon himself could not admit. Jon never truly belonged south of the wall. He belonged with the free folk. Now let's examine what happened with Daenerys. By the time Game of Thrones reached its final season, Jon had learned his true parentage. He was not Ned Stark's bastard after all. He was Aegon Targaryen, the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. This made him the rightful heir to the Iron Throne with a stronger claim than Daenerys herself. The reveal of Jon's true identity should have been one of the most important plot points in the entire series. But here is the secret that most people missed. Jon's Targaryen blood ultimately did not matter. Not in the way anyone expected. Throughout the series, there was a popular fan theory called R plus L equals J. It stands for Rhaegar plus Lyanna equals Jon. This theory dated back to the mid-1990s when the first book came out, and George R.R. Martin himself confirmed it was the test question he gave to the showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss before allowing them to adapt his books. If they could correctly guess Jon's true parentage, he would let them make the show. The theory became one of the most discussed mysteries in modern television, and when it was finally confirmed in Season 6, fans went wild. But then what? Jon's Targaryen heritage caused tension with Daenerys and made some people question who should rule Westeros. But Jon himself never wanted the throne. He repeatedly told people Daenerys was his queen. He bent the knee to her. He fell in love with her. Even after learning he was Aegon Targaryen, Jon still insisted he did not want to rule. So what was the point of revealing Jon's true parentage if he was never going to sit on the Iron Throne? This is where the secret message comes in. Jon's Targaryen blood was never about putting him on the throne. It was about showing that blood and birthright do not define who you are. Jon was raised as a Stark. He learned honor and duty from Ned Stark. He grew up with Stark values. The reveal that he was a Targaryen by birth did not change any of that. He was still more Stark than Targaryen in every way that mattered. But even being a Stark was ultimately just another label, another chain binding him to expectations that were not his own. The moment Jon killed Daenerys is one of the most debated scenes in television history. Some people hated it. Some people understood it. But most people missed why it was so significant for Jon's character arc. After Daenerys burned King's Landing and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people, Jon was faced with an impossible choice. Tyrion, imprisoned for treason, begged Jon to see what Daenerys had become. She had given a speech promising to liberate the entire world, which meant more war, more death, and more cities burned to ash. Tyrion reminded Jon of something Maester Aemon once told him back in Season 1. Love is the death of duty. For Jon's entire life, he had tried to balance love and duty. He left Ygritte to return to the Night's Watch because of duty. He gave up his chance at becoming a legitimate Stark and Lord of Winterfell when Stannis offered it because of his duty to the Watch. He bent the knee to Daenerys partly out of duty to save the North from the White Walkers. But when Jon walked into that throne room and kissed Daenerys before plunging a dagger into her heart, he was not choosing duty over love. He was choosing his family. Sansa and Arya were his family, even if they were technically his cousins and not his sisters. They would never bend the knee to Daenerys, and Daenerys had made it clear she would destroy anyone who stood in her way. So Jon made his choice. What makes this moment so tragic is that Jon did not want to do it. Right up until the last second, he was trying to convince himself that Daenerys could change, that she would listen to reason. The official script for the finale says that when Jon looked at Daenerys in that throne room, his need to believe in her was almost overwhelming. But he knew what needed to be done. And so he did it. Not because he was honorable. Not because it was his duty. But because protecting his family mattered more than anything else. This was Jon finally putting what he wanted, what he believed, ahead of abstract concepts like honor and duty. The reaction from Dragon is also significant. When the dragon found Daenerys dead in Jon's arms, everyone expected Dragon to burn Jon alive. But he did not. Instead, Dragon melted the Iron Throne itself before taking Daenerys's body and flying away. Why? Some fans theorize that Dragon sensed Jon was a Targaryen and could not kill his own kin. Others believe Dragon understood that Daenerys had become something terrible and that Jon did what was necessary. The throne being destroyed is symbolic. It represents the end of the old system, the end of the endless cycle of people fighting and dying for power. After killing Daenerys, Jon was arrested by Grey Worm and the Unsullied. His fate was decided weeks later at the Dragon Pit, where the remaining lords and ladies of Westeros gathered. They chose Bran Stark as king, not Jon. They established that future rulers would be elected rather than inheriting the crown by blood. And they sent Jon back to the Night's Watch to appease Grey Worm. But here is what's brilliant about all of this. Nobody actually expected Jon to stay at the Wall. Tyrion knew it. Sansa knew it. Even Bran probably knew it. The Night's Watch sentence was political theater, a way to end the standoff without more bloodshed. Watch that final scene again and you will notice something. When Jon arrives at Castle Black, the mood is almost cheerful. Tormund and the wildlings greet him like an old friend. Ghost, Jon's dire wolf who had been living beyond the wall, comes running to him and Jon finally gives him the affection he deserves. And then they all leave together, heading north into the forest. Jon does not protest. He does not talk about his duty to guard the wall. He does not express any reluctance. He is going home. And not to Winterfell. Home to the true north, beyond the wall, with the free folk. The final shot is important. As they ride through the forest, you see a small green plant beginning to grow through the snow. This symbolizes renewal and new life. The long winter is ending. Spring is coming to the lands beyond the wall. And Jon is leading the free folk to a place where they can live in peace, free from kings and queens and the Game of Thrones. This is not a punishment. This is a reward. Jon is finally free. Now let's talk about the symbolism that ties his entire arc together. The Night's Watch oath contains a line that says, "I am the shield that guards the realms of men." For years, Jon took that literally. He thought his purpose was to guard the wall against threats. But by the end, Jon realizes what that truly means. Sometimes protecting people means breaking rules. Sometimes it means turning against your own queen. And sometimes it means walking away from everything you were taught to value. Jon's ending also mirrors another character who gave up the throne, Maester Aemon. Aemon was a Targaryen prince who was offered the crown after his father died. But he refused it, choosing to serve at the wall instead. He told Jon this story back in Season 1, and it deeply affected Jon. Aemon understood that sometimes the right choice is to refuse power, to step away from the burden of rule. Jon makes the same choice in the end, but he goes even further. He does not just refuse the throne. He walks away from everything. No more oaths. No more duty. Just freedom. The books have not reached this point yet. In George R.R. Martin's A Dance with Dragons, Jon is still dead, murdered by his Night's Watch brothers. We do not know for certain if Martin's ending will match the show's ending. But Martin has confirmed that the broad strokes of the ending, including Jon's fate, were his ideas that he shared with the showrunners. So while the details might differ, Jon is likely heading toward a similar conclusion in the books. And in the books, there is even more foreshadowing. Jon's chapters are filled with moments where he questions his oaths, where he feels torn between duty and what he knows is right. The books spend far more time inside Jon's head, showing us his internal struggles. One of the most interesting aspects of Jon's book story is that he looks so much like Ned Stark that nobody ever questions his parentage. Jon's appearance is pure Stark, with dark hair and grey eyes. Meanwhile, most of Ned's actual children look like Tullis with auburn hair. This means Catelyn had to look at Jon every day and see a perfect reflection of her husband, a constant reminder of what she believed was Ned's infidelity. It adds another layer of tragedy to Jon's childhood. But it also reinforces that Jon is culturally and spiritually a Stark, regardless of his Targaryen blood. The books also include a character named young Griff who claims to be Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar. If young Griff really is who he says he is, then Jon would have an older half-brother with the same name as him. That is right, Jon's birth name in the show is also Aegon Targaryen. This caused confusion among fans. Why would Rhaegar name two of his sons Aegon? The show never explains it. The most likely explanation is that the show made a mistake or simplified things for television. In the books, if Jon's true name is revealed, it will probably be something different. Many fans speculate it might be Jaehaerys or Aemon, names that have significance in Targaryen history and would create a clearer parallel to Maester Aemon. Let's address the criticism of Jon's ending. Many fans felt disappointed that Jon did not become king or play a bigger role in defeating the Night King. Some felt his Targaryen heritage was wasted. The final season was rushed, cramming what should have been multiple seasons worth of story into just 6 episodes. Character development suffered. Daenerys' descent into madness felt abrupt. Jon seemed to have very little agency in the final episodes, mostly just reacting to events around him. These are all valid criticisms of the execution. But the core idea of Jon's ending, the concept that he walks away from power and finds freedom beyond the wall, is actually brilliant. It subverts every fantasy trope. The secret prince with the rightful claim does not take the throne. The hero does not get the glory. Instead, he gets something better. He gets to live on his own terms for the first time in his life. No more trying to prove himself. No more feeling like an outsider. No more impossible choices between love and duty. Just life. Simple, honest, free. This is why Tormund's words earlier in the season are so important. When Tormund told Jon "You have the real North in you," he was not talking about Winterfell or the political North that Sansa ruled. He meant the lands beyond the wall, where people live without kings, without rules, without the Game of Thrones. That is where Jon always belonged. It just took him 8 seasons to realize it. Kit Harington, the actor who played Jon, has spoken about the ending in interviews. He said when he first read the script and saw Jon going beyond the wall, it made him cry. Not because it was sad, but because after everything Jon had been through, he finally found peace. Harington said it felt like Jon was set free rather than punished. And that is exactly the point. To everyone in King's Landing, Jon's sentence looked like exile and disgrace. But to Jon, and to us as the audience if we are paying attention, it was liberation. The composer Ramin Djawadi also confirmed this in an interview. He said the music for Jon's final scene was meant to be positive, a new beginning. The fact that there are wildling children in that final scene is significant. In the Night's Watch, Jon could not have a family. But beyond the wall with the free folk, those rules do not apply. Jon could potentially settle down, maybe even find love again, and build a life. He is finally allowed to be a person instead of a symbol. There is also a beautiful parallel to the very first scene of Game of Thrones. The show opened with 3 Night's Watch Rangers going beyond the wall and encountering the White Walkers. Only one survived to bring the warning south, and Ned Stark executed him for deserting. The show ends with Jon going beyond the wall, but this time there are no monsters waiting. The threat is gone. The land is healing. It is a reversal that shows how far the story has come. The secret message of Jon Snow's ending is this: you do not have to be what others expect you to be. Jon spent his entire life trying to live up to impossible standards. Trying to be as honorable as Ned Stark. Trying to prove he was worthy despite being a bastard. Trying to be a good Lord Commander, a good king in the north, a good partner to Daenerys. He sacrificed his own happiness again and again because he thought that was what honor demanded. But in the end, he learned that true honor is not about following rules blindly. It is about protecting the people you love and being true to yourself. Jon's ending shows that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Walk away from power. Walk away from duty. Walk away from the expectations that others place on you. The Game of Thrones destroyed nearly everyone who played it. Ned Stark was executed. Robb Stark was murdered. Stannis Baratheon burned his own daughter and lost everything. Daenerys became the villain she always feared becoming. Cersei died in the rubble of her own castle. But Jon refused to play. He took himself out of the game entirely. And that is why he survived and found peace. The tragedy is that it took losing everything for Jon to find himself. He had to die and come back. He had to lose Ygritte. He had to kill the woman he loved. He had to give up his name, his claim, his entire identity. Only then could he be free. But maybe that was always the only way. Maybe Jon needed to strip away all those layers, all those titles and obligations, to discover who he truly was underneath. Not Aegon Targaryen. Not Lord Commander. Not King in the North. Just Jon. A man who belongs with the free folk in the true North. So when you watch that final scene again, do not see it as a punishment or a sad ending. See it as the moment when Jon Snow finally comes home. Watch how he smiles when he sees Tormund. How gently he touches Ghost. How he glances back at the wall one final time before riding into his future. He is leaving behind 8 seasons of pain and sacrifice. He is riding toward a life where he can finally be free. After everything Jon went through, after all the death and heartbreak and impossible choices, he earned that ending. He earned his freedom. The real secret message that everyone missed is that Game of Thrones was never really about who sits on the Iron Throne. It was about breaking the wheel, as Daenerys once said, though she misunderstood what that meant. Breaking the wheel meant ending the cycle of people fighting for power. It meant moving beyond the idea that ruling and conquest are the highest goals. Jon broke that will by refusing to participate anymore. He chose life over glory. Freedom over power. And in doing so, he won the only victory that actually mattered. That is Jon Snow's true ending. Not exile. Liberation. Not punishment. Reward. Not the end of his story. A new beginning. The North remembers, they said throughout the series. But the real North, the North beyond the wall, had been waiting for Jon all along. And when he finally went home, he went not as a lord or a king, but as one of them. Free.